Hey guys, it's Danny. I hope you all had a great weekend. Today, time to get back to work. We are going to talk about Cattleya orchids. This is not a Cattleya, but it's so pretty, I just had to start the video with it. It's a bulbophyllum. We'll talk about it a different time. Today though, I want to focus on a hands-on guide of Cattleya orchids. You know how we did with the Paphiopedilums? I do have a care guide which talks about light and all of those fun stuff. Check it down below. It's an old video, it needs redoing, but details regarding culture conditions we can find everywhere. I'll link you also to the AOS website if you like. I want to go into the practical approach, things that you will experience when growing Cattleya orchids, which culture sheets usually don't talk about. So if you know the Paphiopedilum guide, you know what to expect today. If not, you have that video down below as well. With that said though, let's just start and you'll see what I'm talking about. Cattleya orchids are sympodial orchids which, like Oncidium orchids, produce pseudobulbs. The shape is a little different, but in essence they do pretty much the same thing. Now, unlike other sympodial orchids, Cattleyas will produce flower spikes from the very top of their pseudobulbs. We call them terminal spike. This means that the pseudobulb will never bloom again if it already bloomed. As I was saying, the vast majority of Cattleyas will bloom from the very top of the cane, but there are a few exceptions. Cattleya walkeriana, for example, will produce a flower spike from the base of an existing pseudobulb. It will look like a new growth until one day you're gonna realize it's just a formation with flowers on top but no leaves. The Cattleya nobilior does the very same thing to my knowledge, and there might be a few other species. If you know them, put them down below in the comment section, but the vast majority of Cattleya orchids, including the ones you find at the flower shop or garden center, will only produce flowers from the very top of the pseudobulb. Now regarding how they bloom, well, it's quite interesting. Since the Cattleyas are a very diverse group, if you consider the intergeneric hybrids as well, you will find many different behaviors. Many Cattleya orchids will produce a sheath on top of the pseudobulb. The sheath is this leaf-like formation which is very thin with the role of actually protecting the buds as they form. As the pseudobulb grows and matures, you will discover with some orchids that inside in the middle you will see a tiny little leaf which is thinner than usual. That is the sheath, and that's where the flower spike will arise from. Now, these sheaths can vary. Some can be rather tiny, while others can be rather large, as big as the leaf almost. Some sheaths will dry in the process, but buds will still form inside, while others will remain green throughout the flowering process. P.S. On my Cattleya orchids you will see ants because I keep them outside. They're harmless, had them for years, they don't bring any other pests, so no need to worry about it, just try to ignore them. Some Cattleyas, however, do not produce any type of sheath, and as the pseudobulb matures, you will see the buds starting to form inside the leaf as well. And sometimes it can happen that they will bloom even before the leaf completely opens and matures. In this instance, the orchids will bloom pretty much right away as the pseudobulb matures, but there are cases in which some Cattleyas can wait even a year before they start to create the buds in the sheath. So in the end, they can have different ways of blooming, but the thing is, 99.999% of the Cattleyas only bloom once per pseudobulb. And I don't say 100% because you never know what species we're gonna discover next. However though, Cattleya orchids can actually put on a great show because they can have multiple directions of growth. A mature Cattleya can have multiple new pseudobulbs at once in different parts of the orchid, such as in this case in which we will have multiple flowers on the orchid. Also, we can have flowers that don't all open at the same time if the pseudobulbs don't all mature at the same time. It happens sometimes. Speaking about this, there are Cattleyas which only grow one pseudobulb per year, thus they only bloom once per year. Usually the species do that. But if we have multiple directions of growth, obviously we are going to grow 2, 3, 4 pseudobulbs per year, just not in a succession, but in a different part of the orchid. The orchid overall will still bloom once a year, but it will just have more flowers on different parts of the orchid, depending how many new pseudobulbs it created. There are, however, Cattleyas which grow multiple pseudobulbs per year in one direction of growth, so we're now referring to those who have multiple directions. These are the fast-growing Cattleyas, so you can have one which will grow, will bloom, and then right after start to create another new growth, which will develop and bloom again, and this can happen twice, 3, 4 times a year, depending how fast the orchid grows. and in the same direction. Usually the flower shop hybrids tend to do this because they're created for production, and usually many of the species will have a set schedule, so they will not just bloom throughout the year. There are a few species which bloom multiple times a year and they grow very fast, so through hybridization we got a little bit of the beauty of these one-time bloomers and the vigorousness of the others, and we created something new, but that's a whole different story. It all depends on the orchid you have, and oh boy, there are so many Cattleya hybrids out there. Cattleya flowers come in various colors, various shapes, various fragrances. Most of them are fragrant actually, most in the daytime, but some in the nighttime as well. They can have various fragrances as well, starting from floral to soapy to even spicy or peppery. But most interesting to me is that they can actually be color changers. For example, this orchid, it is towards the end of her flower life, and you can see the flower is very pale. It has been this way for the past week or so. But when this flower first opened, it was very, very vibrant. The lip was very purple. And this is a trait that quite a few other Cattleyas have. In time, the flower can actually change color. And sometimes it can go lighter, it can get washed out. But sometimes it can actually open lighter and then after a few days get progressively more intense in color. Some Cattleyas can have different colors throughout the year depending on the season, depending on health, and sometimes depending on factors which are hard to pinpoint. There are some Cattleya orchids which bloom better in the winter time, not in the summertime. And of course, some Cattleyas will remain the same coloration, same shape, no matter the season, no matter when the flower opens, they will just look pretty much the same throughout. Now, the way these orchids grow is again very interesting, and we cannot put them all in the same bucket and say that the roots are created at a particular time for all of them, or that they will bloom at a particular time across the board. So first of all, root production. We are used to seeing new roots being created from new growths. Well, with Cattleyas, it's not always the case. Some Cattleyas will completely mature pseudobulbs and even create buds before they put on roots, while other Cattleyas will start to grow new roots as the new growth grows as well, so before it completely matures. And others will produce new roots after the new growth matures and blooms already. And if you couple this with a Cattleya which only blooms one pseudobulb per year per direction of growth, well, you're gonna have just a month or two when new roots will be produced, and the rest of the year will be occupied with the existing roots growing, branching, and in good care sustaining the orchid. But new roots, none of the kind. And to continue with the interesting features, on top of each pseudobulb, Cattleya orchids can have one leaf. We call these unifoliate Cattleyas. Or they can have two leaves. We call them bifoliate Cattleyas. Or they can have multiple leaves. I don't think we call these anything. New growths typically are formed by the latest matured pseudobulb, typically the one that bloomed if you had blooms on your orchid. But in the back, the older pseudobulbs still have dormant eyes or dormant buds, which in good conditions or depending on the external factors, they can wake up and start to create a new growth, practically giving the orchid another direction of growth. And this can happen pretty much any time, but if you have very old and not so good looking pseudobulbs, these guys are less prone to create new growth. But if you have perfectly mature and in good condition pseudobulbs, some of these eyes can actually start to grow one day. In my experience, it has to do with culture. The more benefits the orchid has, such as light, water, fertilizer, the more it is prone to create multiple directions of growth from the older pseudobulbs. Most Cattleyas produce sheaths. If we compare them to Oncidium, these are the equivalent of those lateral leaves, which do protect the pseudobulb. But in the Cattleya case, most of them, again 99% of them, will completely dry these sheaths. So you can actually peel them off once they are completely dry, because they will actually serve no purpose. They are very papery, so they're not keeping in moisture or anything. Furthermore, if you have an infestation with a pest, they can hide under these sheaths. With time, these sheaths will become more and more brittle, especially with water, so you can actually remove them at any time. You can leave them on the orchid if you want. They will eventually fall in time on their own, But in my experience, it is actually better to remove them because of the pest issue and also because the orchid looks a little better with them removed. I'm not very good at it, as you can see, but sometimes I just have one of those days when I go and clean off all of my Cattleya orchids, and that is perfectly fine. Now, if you've already read up on Cattleya orchids and what cultural preferences they have, you already know they like bright light. Well, some Cattleyas do respond visually to bright light. Some of them will get this purple reddish tinge, which is absolutely normal. It is a pigment called anthocyanin. You have more information in the description, and its role is to actually protect the canes or leaves or the other structures of the orchid against the sun. This pigment will also occur sometimes in the cold, but typically it is caused by bright light. However, not all Cattleyas will become red when exposed to bright light. Some Cattleyas will respond to light by having a very light green color, and with many of them, this is absolutely normal as well. Some will even respond with these so-called freckles. These are very dark purple dots on the leaves. They are absolutely normal and they're not a sign of ailment. And in my experience, I observed that typically Cattleyas which have dots, purple dots that is, on their flowers, will have some purple dots on their leaves and new growths as well. Absolutely normal, and there are a few species very known for having these freckles on the leaves. In my experience, Cattleyas have very sensitive roots, and I'm not referring to the type of medium. They typically adjust very well to pretty much any type of medium you want to grow them in. You have some marbles which you like, I'm betting you can grow them in the marbles. But if you disturb the roots, I don't think the story will end well. I've had dendrobiums which I repotted over and over again, and they still have the very same roots for multiple years. Cattleyas, on the other hand, oh no. Typically, when you repot Cattleyas, most of the old roots will completely die off. If they're more than 1 year old, chances are they're not gonna last. The roots which are more prone to last are the newest roots. Therefore, in the hobby, it is a great idea to wait for the Cattleya to start producing new roots. When you see new root tips just starting to poke through, you know that it actually is the best time to repot the Cattleya. The logic is, if you're gonna lose the older roots, you will have pretty soon a bunch of new roots starting to hydrate the orchid. If you don't have new roots on the way when you repot and you lose the older roots, who knows when new roots will be created? Who knows if your orchid will actually get so dehydrated as to be set back or worse. So with Cattleyas, it's a good idea to wait for the new roots because older roots simply don't take well to repottings. Some Cattleyas will take better. If you're very careful not to damage anything, if you're working with moss or inorganic materials, then things will be a lot better. But typically there is always a risk when you repot Cattleyas. Their roots are simply not meant to last. Well, to be honest, their roots are simply not meant to be repotted. But hey, we grow orchids in living rooms, not on a tree in the middle of our room, right? So we have to do what we have to do. New growths on Cattleyas always lean towards the light source. So in this example, this is a new growth. Let's say my window is here, and we can already see that the new growth is leaning towards the theoretical window. To try and straighten this growth, I can simply do this. And at this point, in most cases, the growth will straighten, if not completely, then partially. I did have cases in which the growth completely straightened up and the orchid looked a lot tidier. So keep in mind, you can actually play with the light source and shape the orchid using no stakes, but just the light. And in the end, some Cattleyas are very tiny, some are very big, many of them fall in between these sizes. So there is something for everyone. If you don't have a lot of space, definitely check out Sophronides. They're reclassified as Cattleyas, but nobody cares. We're gonna call them Sophronides. Google this name, Google their hybrids. Typically these orchids are the ones which stay tinier. And things like the Laelias, which again are now reclassified as Cattleyas, but nobody cares. Search for Laelia purpurata and other, let's say, very similar orchids. You will find a lot of very big orchids. Typically with bigger orchids come bigger flowers or a bigger number of flowers. Some Cattleyas produce a cluster of blooms rather than, let's say, 3 very large flowers. So it's such a diverse group of orchids that I'm sure there is something for everyone. I'm not sure if I should say it's my favorite group of orchids because it's kind of a tie between them and oncidiums, but definitely the fact that I have a hot climate helps. They love the heat, they do very well, they give me no headaches. So I love them. Why wouldn't I love them? They're beautiful, fragrant, and very easy to grow for me. So alrighty guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this useful. And again, for more elaborate tutorials, do visit the description. I'll try to share with you other cultural notes if you're extremely new to Cattleyas. And if you're not, I hope you learned something new today. And you know the drill, like or dislike this video below, subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, tutorials, Q&As, and other fun orchid subjects. And if you'd like to support the channel, visit the merch store down below. We have limited edition stuff at the moment, so check it out. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!